This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is an inspiring speaker, workshop facilitator, and coach. She shares powerful, healing, and simplifying stress management, self-care, and systems with multi-passionate entrepreneurs who are balancing business and family. She's been featured as a keynote speaker, facilitating both in-person and virtual workshops on topics relating to productivity and stress. She has also been a guest on over 90 podcasts and virtual summits. When she's not sharing the wonders of simplicity, self-awareness, and systems, you can find her playing music and watching movies with her husband and kiddos, or drinking iced coffee and reading while trapped under her cat. She is the founder of Positively Productive Systems, host of the Positively Living podcast, productivity and accountability coach. Please welcome Lisa Zawrotny.
Zawrotny, got it.
I knew I'd stumble on it. Those last names, they get me every time. I will say that I'm a pretty good public speaker and an interviewer, but last names, they stump me every time.
I wasn't playing fair.
What is Zawrotny? Where does that hail from?
Oh, it's Polish.
Polish, okay. Yep. My wife Devin is part Polish and Irish, but if you saw her, you would only think she's Irish with the freckles and the red hair.
Well, Donegan was my maiden name, so I came from the Irish and married into the Polish name.
I was going to say you actually look have very similar features than her. I want to just jump right into your story here, and in your bio there, we speak so much about productivity and multi-passionate and all these other things, and we're gonna unpack all of that. But I think you had an aha moment which led you to that road, and I'm speaking about mom and your journey there as a caregiver. And if you can share a little bit about that with our audience here and what that life was like and how it led to you to where you are today.
Yeah, I'd be honored to. And it's a really interesting thing for me because every time I go to tell the story, it's a challenge because I still feel the weight of that time. And I was a caregiver for my mom. I call it my origin story now because, my kids and I watch a lot of Marvel movies. Cool. And it's one of those things where you can look back on something that was so difficult and go, wow, what a set of life lessons and what can I do with it? So when I was pregnant with my son, I moved my mom into our home. She had Alzheimer's. It was mild at the time. There was cognitive decline. We weren't sure what was going on. And I cared for her for nearly 5 years. During this time, I had my son, and then I was pregnant. So I've had 2 children. And so that's 2 pregnancies, 2 children, and at one point in time, caring for her and an infant and a toddler all at the same time. While my husband was working full time, we were running a business. And I don't know, I was probably freelancing too. And my goodness, survival mode is like an understatement. So if you're listening right now and you're in survival mode, or if you've been in it, my heart to yours, I understand what that means. It means that you pretty much jettison everything from your life that's a non-essential, and sometimes the essential things too. And for me, that was me a lot of the times. And we got through it, and I served my family the best I possibly could. I gave them every opportunity. And when my mom passed away, I had a choice. I was at a crossroads to say, okay, what's next? And I remember distinctly saying, what do I do? And I think that probably would sound familiar to most. our instincts are always to do something. What do I have to do? What do I have to add? I have a problem. I have a challenge. What do I do? And there was a voice inside me that said, oh, whoa, wait a minute. We've just been through a lot. Wait, stop, take a breath, take a moment, clear a path. There's a lot that hasn't been tended to in a long time. Take care of that. And I'm so grateful I did, because that voice led me to where I am today. Many steps in between, mind you. But the first step that it did was literally to clear a path physically, because we had, unopened paperwork and all kind of bins of things. And of course there was toys, and there was so much that needed to be processed. But also what needed to be processed was what I'd just gone through, which, it took me a long time to say that was trauma. and that counts too. So often we want to say, oh no, someone who went through something extreme, catastrophic, that's trauma. Well, this is trauma too. The other thing, grief. And when you have someone who has cognitive decline, that's a very complex grief. It's not only losing someone from a sickness, it's losing them before you've even lost them. And then losing them. And it's almost like I had a reverse grieving process where I felt relieved afterwards, and then I felt guilty for feeling relieved. And it was so many things. And I needed to go through that. I needed to deal with it. I needed to research it. I needed to take care of me. And when I did, it was essentially what I call now decluttering, my whole life inside and out. Oh my goodness, the healing was so incredible that I thought, okay, I'm onto something. I need to start sharing this. The most obvious way to share that, the one thing that I think everybody can universally understand, is decluttering, right? Having clutter in your life and sorting through that. And so I began as a professional organizer and started the path to decluttering people's lives that I still do today, but it's many iterations later.
I can empathize with you on so many levels here, in so many different ways. And they certainly are, in terms of like finding clarity in our life, and what are the next steps, that question of what's next? What do I do now? And that comes up when you get fired from a job, which I've been in those shoes. When you decide you're going to leave a job, I've been in those shoes. When you decide you're going to start a new company, I've been in those shoes. And we're going to speak about that, but I want to stay with your mom for a second here, because you related this experience to trauma, and that trauma is different for everyone. And I think that that's so important for our audience to hear, because so many of us go through life, and it's hard to relate some of our pain, some of our trauma, some of our disabilities with others, because we think, it's not that big of a deal. We don't realize. I speak on both sides of this, by the way, because we sometimes allow these traumas or these disabilities or whatever they are to hold us back. But sometimes we also, on today's conversation, is about acknowledging them, and what you said, the healing process. So acknowledging it's a trauma. And so here's how I empathize with you on this is, I actually, my grandmother also had Alzheimer's and dementia, and my mother, who I can't wait to connect you with, because you guys are going to have such a wonderful conversation. My mother was the caregiver. She's one of 4 children. We were fortunate, to take a step back in all of this. We were fortunate in that my grandmother lived with us throughout my childhood. I don't remember a time that my grandmother didn't live with me. I knew it as a baby. And I know that she lived with my parents prior to us being born, because my grandfather had passed away, and so she moved in, and it was just the situation. We don't need to go there. But the point that I'm getting at here is, my grandmother and I were very close, to the point where I named my oldest daughter Denise after her. And we have the same birthday, January 12th. We share that in common as well. And I was her petit poussin. We spoke French at home, and that means her little chick. So she always called me that. So when you said this is heavy, I was ready with tissues, because I know that I'm going to have some tears today with you, which already kind of just started right there. But where I'm going with this goes into the caregiver mode. So watching that decline. So as a young boy, I'm going into my teen years, and I'm with my grandmother all the time because she had a license and I had my permit. And in New York City, she could sit passenger while I drove all of my friends around. And I made her the promise to her that if you sit passenger with me while I have my permit, once I get my license, I'll drive you anywhere you want. I'll bring you anywhere you want, so I could drop her off and pick her up whenever she wanted. And I kept to that promise, I'm proud to say. But I spent a lot of time with her, and I started realizing that she would forget things. She would get angry. Right? Do you remember that with your mom? She would get angry. She would have a disposition on things that she just never had when I was a child. Like, she was this loving, patient, just stoic woman. And all of a sudden she was acting irrational and angry and physically upset. Like, she physically pushed my brother down a flight of stairs because she thought he was a robber, a thief. And, she did all these things. And so it impacted us as a family, because at the time we didn't know what she was experiencing. We didn't understand the disease. Yeah. And so we experienced it as a family before even understanding what was happening. And we were getting upset with her and frustrated with her and impatient with her. And you go to the clutter, and I'm going to pass this back on to you in a second, is the amount of clutter, the amount of things that she started saving and hoarding. And I'm going to leave this on a light note here, in that when she did pass, when she did finally pass, which, like you said, was like, I remember saying to my mother, I said, wouldn't it, see, I told you you were going to do this to me. I said, wouldn't it be nice if we can just give Dudu, that's what her nickname was, Dudu, if we can give her a pill and she can just go to sleep, and she doesn't have to feel the pain anymore. That you talk about the healing and the pain that we go through, right? That we're thinking about a loved one and we want them to pass just so that it could be over for them. Yeah. That's what was the conversations that we were having sometimes. So it was really, really hard. But back to this light note, when she did pass, I remember cleaning out her bedroom with my sister, and we would see these boxes, and they all said tissu, and tissu in French is actually cloth, is actually fabric, not tissue, but fabric. And it said tissu on everything. And we just kept opening up boxes of fabric. And it was just like, tissu. And it's like, she was just like hoarding fabric and boxes in her bedroom. It was wild. So there was some fun to it. But, I go back to two things here in that, of the caregiver and the trauma that my mother experienced, her siblings as well, when they would, of course, host their mom. My little brother speaks about it. So the trauma there, I don't want us to just pass over that so quickly and then move into the decluttering, which is why I bring up the tissue story, in that when you're caring for someone, clutter builds up. It builds up on their end and it builds up on our end. And it's so important to declutter, because that was part of the healing process for my sister and I and our family. So just to go back to and jump in right there. Go ahead.
Yeah. So with clutter, many reasons why people don't declutter is because it's not simply things. It's a connection to the head and heart. And I made that connection early on, and I'm sure it was in part because of this experience with my mom. And I know what you mean about the complexities. I had two little ones, and I had my mother there with us, and the norm, the expectation is you have your mother there, and she's with her grandchildren. She was their Omi. So it was a German nickname for her. And I knew intrinsically that she loved them, and she'd always been a very caring, nurturing mother, but she would sundown. That's a term, at night where, nighttime gets very active for them, and they get anxious. And instead of sleeping, they're doing things. hoarding, searching through things, squirreling things away. You have to figure, and this is only my speculation, not a doctor, don't play one on TV, but I've been through a lot of it. And when you start with a mind that's functioning and it starts to slip away, it has to be a very scary thing. So everything that they do is a search for control and to save face. And I would not be surprised if there was a violent or angry reaction because of that frustration. So did I react well to that all the time? Oh, no. I did the same thing. I was very frustrated. I didn't know what was going on. I had to learn so much on the fly. But the biggest thing for me in terms of the trauma that I had to accept later was I had a mother in my home and I feared for the safety of my children. That's a lot to unpack. And, I just did what I had to do in that moment. But yes, to your point, with trauma, and we don't have to say this in a way where it's like so heavy, because the truth is we all experience it. But I think when we start to understand that we don't compare trauma or joy for that matter. It is ours and ours alone. Grief, there's no timeline for grief. There's no rule book. The closest one is on Grief and Grieving. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did a phenomenal job trying to help us through the patterns and the stages, but you get to choose what order you do it in and if you're going to do each of those and how long it lasts. It's all up to you. And for me, it took me a while to get in gear, but you're absolutely right. The decluttering is actually a critically important part of that healing process because it essentially makes you face those moments, those memories, those thoughts. The things that we have in our lives have meaning because we give them meaning.
And Alzheimer is a very common disease. We live here in the Hudson Valley, and on the walkway bridge close by here, there's a walk for Alzheimer's, and there's hundreds of people show up. So this isn't unique to you or I. And I love the fact of what you just said, that there's no comparing. There's no comparing trauma or joy. And I'm with you on that because we see it from a public speaking standpoint, right? You're a speaker, I'm a speaker, and people say, "Oh, you did so good. I wish I could speak like that." And it's like, no. I speak like me, and you speak like you, and you do good too, right? Just to kind of bring it there. But reason why I bring up the number of people that deal with a disease like this, and there's so many others out there, and what we can relate are some of the skills and tools that we need when living with or responding to someone that we care about or that we love or that we just know who is dealing with something like Alzheimer's. And so I'll start us off just to kind of see, so you can see where I'm headed with this in terms of the tools that we might need is patience. Is if you're able to just try to be as patient as possible in the moment with that person and with yourself, to give yourself some grace and to be patient about what's happening, the surroundings, the moment, because they are acting irrational or whatever it is. If you can just leave some space for them, a lot of times they might come back to reality with you. A lot of times they might just teeter out or the energy will drop. And then you can get back to what it is that you were doing. So I'll start off with patience is so important while working or living with somebody like this.
Yeah, and the patience part of it, keep in mind, every one of these tools is not only a tool that you offer for the person, but you offer for yourself, right? So patience with yourself and saying, I'm in an impossible situation where I'm trying to apply logic to someone who isn't as able to do so anymore, or may say something because that is their reality. So seeking to understand, it's not that we can necessarily understand the disease, but we can understand that the disease changes the person that's in front of us. I pretty much loathe the "don't take it personally" phrase that people love to bandy about, because it's like, this is personal. But there is a separation. You talked about space. There's a lot of different ways we can create space. And when we can consistently say, there's a disease happening here that takes them from being the person I knew and loved and takes them away from reacting to me the way that they would necessarily want to.
Mm-hmm.
If you can create that reminder loop going, it can help you step back from the reactive mode of wondering why they're doing this, or, because it's that natural inclination of something just happened. Don't they love me anymore? Or why would they do that? And there's a lot of questions, and we don't have the satisfaction of many of the answers. But if we can say there's another component here that we don't know about that is affecting things, we can at least say, okay, that's affecting things. This is not the norm. How do I step back from this? And then take that breath, take that breather. And then, of course, I would say, and this is a tool that I've loved with anyone who is interacting with me in a way that may not be working for me, and this could be toddlers as well. So there's a little humor in here, but it really does work. It's called the art of redirect. And so when you're like, okay, this is not working, we're not on the same page, something is going on here, I don't even know what, you don't have to worry about why or what, and you can be like, whoa, did you see that sunrise? That's incredible. Or, my favorite color has always been blue, but then it became green. And it's like these random, like non sequiturs and things like that. It's, using the bright, shiny object intentionally for a good reason. And sometimes too, to your point, that could actually bring them back.
Mm. I love the art of redirect because it does work with the kids so wonderfully. It's like I know that I won't even go there with the other side of the argument, but I love it because when you redirect, you're redirecting to something positive. So you're reinforcing some positivity in the conversation, which is wonderful because you're going to go down a positive route now, even if it was negative before. And it does work with the Alzheimer, with the person suffering from some kind of Alzheimer, because they're really living in this moment. and if you just redirect them, they're going to be in that moment with you much of the time. It's funny because as you were kind of formulating the art of redirect, as you were formulating that part of the tools, I was thinking about how a lot of what we're talking about too can be applied in the corporate world, in the entrepreneurial world, in any community that you're in, because these tools are really tools, effective tools to use with other people, of being patient with somebody, of seeking to understand, of even redirecting if there's something happening in your environment that is uncomfortable for you or that is you're not prepared for right now. It's redirecting, which can really work to an advantage. Of course, we can see the disadvantages to that sometimes, but in terms of this conversation, context of this conversation, it can certainly apply in all those formats.
In fairness, sometimes there's a conversation that needs to be had and you need to stay there.
Yeah.
But we're talking about, let's say you're brainstorming with someone. So in a corporate or entrepreneurial environment, you're working on some stuff and they're coming at it from one angle, you're from the other, and you're like, okay, we're not jiving here. Let's move on to this thing first. Let's talk about this first. We'll put a pin in that, right? Yep. Come back to that. So that's an art of redirect. It's not necessarily that it has to be manipulative, but it is understanding that maybe your wheels are spinning in a particular space and you want to take a moment, because otherwise you're really not getting anywhere. And the only thing you are getting is maybe more frustrated. And we all know that once that happens, you lose focus. You're no longer productive. See, I'm always tying it back to productivity somehow.
I love it.
But then, you're not getting the right ROI, so why not take a moment, set that to the side, move on to the next thing. And so that's a great redirect. Yeah.
And on that note too, in that we need this, and we're going to talk about it in terms of your mom there, but also in the business life, in the business world, it certainly relates to it is a support system. So, having a strong support system around you in anything you do in life, mentors, people that have experienced something like this, and having conversations with them. So where I'm going with this question has to do with self-development. And you brought up Brené Brown. in some of the books that you've read and people that you follow. And she's tremendous speaking about vulnerability and speaking about so many other things. I'm interested in what was your support system when you were going through this time?
So it was a combination of support systems, and I think that's incredibly important. And I'll tie it into, business life as well, in that, of course, I had my immediate family, and they understood things in a different way, especially my husband. So I have to give him a shout out because, man, he went through a lot with me. And then I had some of those close girlfriends who just got it. These were the ones that to this day, and there's a chance they'll hear this because they do live in the Hudson Valley, but Mary and Rashad, man, they were the ones who understood that it was like, hey, can I pick up your kid from daycare today? Or can I just run a gallon of milk to your house? Or, did those what feel like little things maybe at first, or they seem like little things, but they don't feel like little things is, I think, the better way to describe it. So those were the people who were like, what can I do for you? They were kind of my acts of service people. But then, very importantly, I connected with the Office for the Aging and the Alzheimer's Association and went to caregiver support groups. So, and those are the people, and I think of it this way when we have business networks now, the people who really get you. Because, like, for example, my family, they love and support me. They are very excited. I recently celebrated over 20,000 downloads for my podcast.
Yeah.
And thank you. And my kiddo was like, remember when it was 1,000 and we were excited? I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. So they're rooting me on, but they don't always get what entrepreneur life is about. And so it's very important for me to have people in my network who get that, who live it every day. Just like you just did. You cheered me on because you know what an incredible milestone that is and what it takes to get there. You get me. So back to the caregiver support groups. These were people who were going through what I was going through. Now, mine was an unusual sandwich caregiver situation, and I never found an exact match. But at the very least, we understood, here's someone we love, and they're no longer the same person. And yet we have to step up our love for them in terms of our caring and what that means and how that works. It brought so much perspective. And I'll never forget Stuart Grief, connected through the Hudson Valley Alzheimer's Association. He ran that caregiver support group, and he said, do you want to be right or do you want to be sane? And that was the mantra I took forever with me. I mean, that applies to my entire life. Do you want to argue the point in that moment and be right? Or do you want to let it go and be content? And I was like, yeah, I'm taking that one with me. Thank you. So it was a variety of support systems for different aspects of my life, different understanding of my life, and I wouldn't be here without them.
Yeah, I love that. Do you want to be right or do you want to be sane? I experience that with my daughter sometimes. I'm like, all right, Michael, this isn't the one right here. Let it go. Like not
the hill I want to die on.
Right. Like in Frozen, I love that song. Let it go. Now I understand that song more and more as I become more of a parent, I guess, or more experienced as a parent, as I gain more experience as a parent. In these times, these hard times where we are dealing with clutter, right? It's such a great, tangible way of actually speaking about the clutter in our mind too, right? Yep. You're in this fog, right? Where you're taking care of this person, but, eventually you have to find, peace and you have to find clarity. And so I'm interested in, when the time came where she passed and now you had this aha moment, after you were struggling with the questions of what to do, what was it like clearing the clutter, both, like I said, from a tangible perspective and also from a mental perspective?
It's interesting to answer this question, having now been someone who's helped so many people over the years do this very thing, because I now have their experiences that I carry with me. And I have like a retrospective kind of understanding of what was happening to me at the time. So for starters, clearing the physical clutter, well, it felt satisfying. And now I understand why, because you're literally creating space for yourself. You're not walking around boxes, and you're also not walking around the reminders. And that's what clutter is. It's why it's so connected to stress. It's why you are so frustrated around it, even if, you know logically that has to be there, or you can't get to it yet, or whatever, is because it's a reminder of tasks you're not doing, of things you didn't get to, of memories. There's sentimental, there's task related. I mean, clutter can tap into so many different things that our brains will quickly turn into something that's a problem. You know what I mean? Like that guilt and that shame. So the more that I could release those things, and the more that I had space and I could see, it felt like progress. So it was encouraging. And I did study a lot to figure out how to approach this. And some of it was intuitive on my part. I've always been a person inclined toward organizing, so it came very naturally to me. But for example, I was able to quickly go through the majority of her clothing and donate that. And I've always had this, it's like a feeling of, if I can make use of this thing, if I can let it go and make use of it. And a lot of people feel that way. So that's a great tip. If you can find someone else to bless an item with, it makes releasing it on your end so much easier. And that's what I did. I was like, there are plenty of places here for me to donate where people could use the excess that we have, this closet full of clothing that she wasn't even wearing for the longest time. Now we can bless and release, right? And I did that for the majority of it, but there were some special pieces, right, that had certain meaning that I had to set to the side because I'm like, not ready for that yet. And intuitively, I knew that. So that's another decluttering tip, especially for sentimental items, is there are many things that are sort of more practical, less sentimental. Go for those first. Practice and build that muscle of finding the things where you're like, this is taking up space that I need in my life for something else, to make space for something else. Go ahead and release that. The stuff that you're like, wait a minute, that's really difficult. You keep that. You keep that indefinitely if you have to. So that was the experience that I had, and that I continue to help so many people with, is that sometimes there are certain things where you're like, I can't let go of that jacket. Then don't.
Yeah, it's funny because I wrote down, I always take notes while you're speaking, and I wrote down memories because I was thinking, all right, I'm like, she's going to go through her decluttering things, but how's she going to get rid of the memories, right? And I'm really happy that you said that, you hold on, you keep some of those. I think that there are some that you probably will keep with you for forever, hopefully. But the tip of donating, it works wonders. Is like, I'm with you on that, in that if you can give it away and somebody else can make use of it, it's going to be so much easier to give it away and to give. The other one that I remember hearing a long time ago, I believe it was Bob Proctor. I don't know. Are you familiar with Bob Proctor's work?
Yeah.
I think it was Bob Proctor. He was one of the first, thought leaders, motivators. Him, Tony Robbins. He was one of the first that I had found online to start following. And I remember him talking about how he didn't talk about it in terms of decluttering, but getting rid of stuff in order to make room for the things you want.
Yes, that's the make space for what matters part that I speak to all the time. So in a few instances, let's say, for example, you've got actual physical space where you're like, okay, we want to make this room into, so that we can have family game night and movie night. But we have these things that are taking up space, and then it changes the perspective. It's like, okay, those were things that we loved, we purchased, we could get into the sunk cost fallacy, right? Where we're like, I've paid for this. I want to keep it. I want to get value out of it. But then when you start to look at it like, oh, but here's what I value more. Having space in this living room, let's say, to do these things with the family. Now it becomes a lot easier to say, okay, well then let's see if someone else can
Right.
take this for their home and make good use of it, because now we're changing what we're doing. Another way is selling items. I tend to proceed with caution, encourage with caution, only because we don't want to get into, again, the term sunk cost fallacy, where you've put in money, time, effort into something such that you get locked into it and you don't want to release it for the sake of something else. And that it's a trap.
Yep.
So you want to be careful of that, right? So the selling of items, one of my favorite recommendations is actually, if you think something is of value and you would like to generate money, let's say the family you want to raise money so that you can get, a piece of furniture that's going to work for the plan that you have for the space. Great. That's a great idea. But at some point, as you are decluttering and creating that space, you have to give yourself deadlines and limits. You can be like, okay, I'll put it on Facebook Marketplace for 1 month. And if it doesn't sell, and you have to do it aggressively, and if it doesn't sell, then it's donated. So you kind of have a plan of attack that way. But it's a great idea to try that, again, with the caveat, if you have the time and the energy to do so, depending upon your life. And then that can be a way to subsidize your new space, your new plans, your new, time.
I'm so happy that you cautioned with that, because so many people, they think with Facebook Marketplace and garage sales and all the rest, that, you know what, I'm going to declutter by selling everything. And you're right. I believe it to be a trap as well. And I've gone through that experience of, it's funny. I started laughing when you were talking about it, because it's like, that person because they're the person on Facebook Marketplace, on whichever marketplace, right, online, and at the garage sale who's trying to sell their items at cost, right? They're trying to get
$200 for this table,
right, right. And I've done that. I'm not going to lie. I thought I was the best salesman in the world, and I was like, I'm going to do that. What I learned is that's not why we're doing the garage sale. We're doing it to get rid of it and maybe get a couple dollars, right? And so I learned that, and so if you want to do it that way, great. And what I want to add to that is, hey, look, if you want to turn it into your business and be an entrepreneur and turn decluttering and selling those items online as a business, that is a decision. And I love that you brought up the word choice a while back in this conversation. It's a choice that you're making, right? You're making the choice. And I want to use that word again, caution, in that when we're making a choice to start essentially a business, it's not like touch or dip your toes in or not. It's not like you can't play both sides. You can't think that you're going to declutter your home and be, you got to pick one. And you got to figure out, because the people who are operators on your marketplaces online and who are really good garage salespeople, they are organized. They are organized, and they have a place for everything, and they run it like a business. So just be sure that you're making the right choice for yourself as you do that. I want to ask you the question now about the choice that you made in moving into this space of decluttering. So we understand kind of the backstory now of that, it came from this clutter that was around you and starting to do it. But then you started moving into helping others with it. And also, I'm going to just advance this conversation a little bit in that of becoming a public speaker, becoming a podcaster, and doing more. So this common thread for you of helping others obviously comes from the caregiver mentality. But I'm interested in how you turn that into a business and the meaning behind it for you.
So the experience of it and the powerful healing, and that's the way that I describe it, is that it was healing. It wasn't just healing for me, it was healing for my family as well. We had more space to move, more space to breathe, space to be together and do the things we wanted to do. And let us not forget the energy that I came with, which was a healing energy, right? And I don't even say that in the woo-woo kind of way. I'm all about the science, but what I mean is, when you are less stressed, less frustrated, when you're happier, when you're content, you bring a different energy to everything you do. And my family could feel that. And I was like, this is amazing. This can happen from decluttering a closet? Really? Like, now, yes, there's more to it than that, right?
I think there's some science behind it. I've felt darn good after decluttering something.
Let me tell you, there is science behind it, and it is. It's what clutter represents, right? All of those, undone tasks and all of the shame and the guilt and and clutter is deferred decisions. In many cases, right? And that's because, decision making, we have decision fatigue in this life. Because here's the thing, you use up all that energy. You go to the store and you see like 50 types of cereal and you're trying to decide.
Right.
And like, okay, what's decision fatigue? I'm tapped out. I'm definitely not going to tackle what's in the back of that closet that I haven't seen since, I don't know, 82. So, I mean, there's some challenges.
It's been there that long. It could stay another year or two.
Exactly. Let it ride, right? So I was like, here's the thing. With that whole, what do I do and how do I bring back, what I can to the family, support us financially? Because caregiving is not only traumatic to you emotionally and potentially physically, but it can be financially as well. Even though we did everything we could, it was still hard on us financially. So I wanted to give back. I've been an entrepreneur at heart forever. My parents were entrepreneurs, so it's always been ingrained in me. I was doing freelance work as it was. I've done a lot of different work over the years. So I thought, okay, I'm onto something. This is powerful and amazing. What do I need to do to step forward? So I actually joined the National Association of, was actually professional organizers originally, and they have expanded to now be the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. But I joined NAPO right away, and I was like, what is this thing? People do this for a living. They go in and they organize and help people release clutter and stress. This is incredible. It's a thing. I found my people. And the way that I started was by having conversations. And I would meet for coffee. I was decluttering myself, so I would donate things. I would check in with friends, and I had a cup of coffee with a friend and said, this is what I'm doing, and this is the impact it's had. And she said, I want to do that too. Would you help me? And I said, you bet I will. Wow.
You said your parents were entrepreneurs as well?
Yes.
What did they do?
They had a small engine. It was a parts and repair shop. So, mowers and chainsaws and things like that. So it was in the country in upstate New York, and it was an unusual business. But I worked there from the moment they could. I don't want to say anything. Well, they're gone now. So if I said they handed me some cash and they're like, you're working for us, nobody's coming after them now. But,
right.
Yeah. So I worked for them for a long time. And, actually they were also in real estate as well. That was prior to that. So they always found a way to create something for themselves and have that kind of control. And I grew up in that atmosphere, so it definitely inspired me.
Yeah. Speak a little bit about that inspiration, because, it's not everybody who is able to come out of an experience like you came out of in terms of taking care of your mother and start decluttering and saying, you know what, yeah, I'm going to help you, and have it in the backdrop of their mind, this is also going to be a business for me. Right. Speak a little bit about that inspiration that came from working with them and being with them on that entrepreneurial level.
Well, I think like with anything else in life, when you are able to see what's possible, especially see up close and personal what's possible, that lands in your brain like, oh, that could be an option. I know many people who've grown up. Actually, there's a great example with my husband. His parents were both teachers, and it was a very traditional, wonderful, honorable job. So they went to work, they had their hours, they had their breaks, they had their retirement. It was very structured and very traditional. And I don't know, I mean, this is sort of a, correlation causation thing, so we want to be careful with that, but he's very much aligned with being an employee. Now, we did have a business together, but it really thrived when I stepped in and started like organizing things and taking care of that aspect. He's an incredible creative photographer. And we actually did wedding photography for many, many years in the Hudson Valley. And it was very successful, but as a combination of the two of us. But his personal inclination is to be employed. And I think my personal inclination has always not to be. Right. Because I like the creative control. And I think I found out later, the way that I could describe myself is multi-passionate creative. And I know that's in the description of what I do, and it's who I serve. And I think it's those of us who are like, I didn't stay at a job for more than 2 years. And the rest of society is like, you're flighty. You're not loyal. What's wrong with you? And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Nothing's wrong with me. It's a need to create and to research and to scan and to move and to change and to, I guess, amass a different kind of knowledge and different experiences in the world. So all that to say, I knew it was possible. I did go through the corporate world. I was gainfully employed. I was a communications manager. I worked in Marcom for a variety of companies. And I appreciate those experiences, but I've never been more me than when I can be an entrepreneur and I can be calling the shots.
Another thing I can so relate to with you in, it's funny because you brought up the multi-passionate, because I was very interested. I underlined that word like 10 times in your bio. I was like, we got to talk about that. I need to understand what that is. Yeah. And as you started unpacking it, I'm like, oh, that's me. That's me. That's me. So I'm starting to understand a little bit more about what you mean when you speak about multi-passionate. I would actually love to just kind of stay here for a second with you about digging in a little bit more in that, because you also say that you work with multi-passionate entrepreneurs. So what does that work look like, and how do you help them realize that it's okay to be a creative?
Okay, so let's start with the concept of multi-passionate and define it in as much as we're able to. So there's multi-passionate. There's also multi-potentialite. That was a phrase by Emily Wapnick, and she has a TED Talk on why some of us don't have one true calling. So you'll definitely want to look that up. I can send you that link.
Oh my goodness.
That was definitely an aha moment for me. So her website is Putty Like, and so she talks about that, and she refers to it as multi-potentialite, which is fun. Then there's also, scanners / careers, serial entrepreneurs, and one of my personal favorites, this goes way back, polymath, and that is what we referred to when we spoke of Da Vinci. When you think about this, man was a military strategist. He painted the Mona Lisa. He was a sculptor. He created some of the first concepts of and invented some of the first concepts of aircraft, basically the glider, right? Things like that, wings. I can't even remember most of the stuff that he's done. And I jokingly have said in my podcast a number of times, I've brought him up, and I was like, and I think he did it unapologetically. I don't think he was walking around like, sorry, I'm doing this now, changed my mind. No, he created. It's like, oh, wait, I know I was doing the inventing thing, but now I'm painting this gal because I don't know. It's like my mom's friend. It's like, no,
Can I tell you? Oh my goodness. I'm so happy. I'm laughing too here because I'm so happy you said that, because people say that to me, and I'm sure you got it too. I know you got it too, where it's like, so what are you doing now? What are you doing? Are you doing these podcasts? You're doing these videos? How are they related to this? And I'm like, and I think what I struggle with, and maybe what you can help me with after this podcast today, or help others with, is I struggle with trying to connect the two, right? So I force the connection with them, when meanwhile there was no connection. It was Michael just wanted to start a podcast. I didn't, it.
Michael was the connection. Okay. So with all of these, this tendency. So these are you might be a multi-passionate if, okay. I really need to do like a post or a podcast about that, right? I do have a podcast I recently did about how to know if you are one. So that would be helpful. But so let's talk about like if someone says, hey, so what do you do? What do you do for a living? And if your first inclination is to be like, how much time do you have? Yeah, you might be a multi-passionate. If you are, doing a lot of different projects, and sometimes you're like, how do they connect? Are they supposed to connect? People want them to connect. What am I,
Right.
If you're inclined to do something, and then you almost feel this guilt where you're like, okay, maybe I'm not going to tell anybody about this right now because they're going to be like, what are you doing now? Right. It's that whole thing. There's also this aspect of just the need to create. If you do look at your resume and you're like, okay, so I was at that job for 2 years and then I moved. And again, it's not because you're not a loyal person. It's not because you're flighty, but you are creative and there's a soul's calling to create. And there's also this desire, this lifelong learning, right? And here's the thing, is not only that, you have a talent, a knack for learning quickly. So you're able to scan it fast. So really what it is you've sped up the process. So you're like, I got what I needed out of this thing in 2 years. And so I'm done now. And everyone's like, what? You're not doing that for your whole life? And you're like, that sounds horrible.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So many levels here. So first I want to give you my first thought that came to mind while I was laughing so hard when you were talking about Leo is I'm just imagining him painting the Mona Lisa and some like manager is like standing over his shoulder, breathing over him going, wait a second, what's going on here? Why are you painting this portrait of this woman? Like, what is this going to do with whatever it is that he's supposed to
do? What does this have to do with wings?
Yeah, right? It's like, and meanwhile, here he is painting the Mona Lisa. Not that I'm equating any of my work to the Mona Lisa, but I mean, that's really the feeling, right? It's like you got this manager and it's so wild. But going back to what you just said there about loyalty is like, I experienced that so much in all of my jobs is this feeling of, like you said, there's regret. There's this feeling, this guilt of like, why did I come here and I was so passionate. I was such a high performer. And then like all of a sudden, like, phew, like just like a plane crashing, I'm out. But loyal, right? Because like you're out in a way where you check out, but you also don't want to just quit. You also don't want to just leave it. And so I'm going to bring some real world stuff into here in terms of this. And for our audience, we're going to get a live coaching session from Lisa here in that, I'm working on, and this is the creative that I'm realizing while speaking with you. I have this, I found an online whiteboard. So I started working on this like whole creative idea on building this like amazing like infrastructure for insurance agencies and branches and all these other things. And I'll also be open to that. Nothing that I'm creating is original in its own way outside of it coming from me and me just kind of like redirecting things. But it's a creative that's coming out of me, right? Like I needed it to be on a whiteboard. I couldn't do it on paper. I couldn't do it by writing it out. It was like I was struggling, but when I put it on a whiteboard and I started drawing the pictures of the boxes and the lines and outlining things on the whiteboard and repositioning them, it started making sense to me. And here's where I'm going with the therapy part is like, I'm doing all of that and it's all making sense and it's all like coming to me to some sort of natural, but on the other side of all of that, I'm also like, all right, I want to build out this public speaking business. And here's what it looks like. And here's what the podcasts look like. And here's what I look like on stage and what I'm going to be doing in my speaker profile and all this other stuff. And I want to be an author. And here are my books that I want to write. And I start doing these things. And here's the therapy part, everyone, is I'm going, the guilt. I'm going, but wait, if I do that and I stop doing that, the whiteboard piece to this, did I give up on something? Did I give up on a dream, on an idea that could be something amazing? And I don't have the answer right now, Lisa. So I'm going to stop there for a second here and hear what your thoughts are. Okay.
So I'm loving this because this is exactly why I not only help with the holistic productivity side of, trying to do less, doing the decluttering, really simplifying what we're doing, but specifically with multi-passionates, because I understand the next level nuances that are happening here. So we talked about what it means to be one, right? All the different things that you're doing. Well, the challenge I think that we have universally, and multi-passionates have a little extra, is this idea of prioritizing what we're doing and dealing with the idea that we have these things that we love to do, and is it okay, and what does it mean each and every time? The fact of the matter is, every day you're making a choice, and was that the right choice? Well, it's coming to an acceptance that it was the right choice in the moment, and understanding that everything that you're doing gives you something you need. And sometimes, this is a great example in decluttering. When we pick up something, oh my gosh, my mom and I used to go shopping. That was something she loved to do. And she'd pick out these like really bright things. And I'd give the Elvis lip, like, oh my God, no, I don't want that. But sometimes I'd buy something and then it'd be in my closet with the tags on, and it would be sitting there, and eventually I would let it go. But what I did, I would remember that that fun that we had. And so the purpose that served was not for me to actually wear it, but it was for us to have that moment together, that experience. So thinking in those terms of all the things that you have, the passions you have, the interest. Now, we are inclined toward the bright, shiny object, but why do we have to make it like that's a negative thing? It's only negative if, and this is the same idea with clutter, okay? Clutter is only truly clutter when it gets in between you and the life you want to be living. That's not mine. That's Peter Walsh's quote, but I love it and I stand by it. So is it getting in the way? If it's getting in the way, then it's clutter. So now you take all these different projects and stuff. And what you mentioned before was, how do they connect? Do they, and so we have to ask the question, do they have to connect? I would flat out say no, because what's connecting is you. You're connecting to something. Your brain is saying, I need to do this. One of my clients, oh my goodness, just ultimate multi-passionate. He is so successful, has an amazing business, lifelong learner. And sometimes he needs these projects. He's going and getting another certification right now. And I'm not going to say no, because it's his happy place. It's where he got into flow, and he's getting the gears going, and he's thinking differently. Well, so this, what you're creating, it doesn't mean that you're not going back to that, but you do have to prioritize what's the thing you're focusing on right now. So you may have to hit pause on that, and then you decide ultimately, as you continue each day to prioritize what's next, what are you focusing on? That may wait. It may wait a while. It may languish, but it had its purpose in that moment, because you're taking the energy from that. Even the way you described it was so excited. Like your energy your energy is already up, and your energy completely shifted when you described that to me. You take that energy and you're applying it to these other things. Now, let's also be practical in our lives. We have families that we're trying to support. We have things that we're trying to do. We have information that we want to share with the world, and some of it is ready to go faster. You're already in the podcast. You are already reaching out to the world and sharing what you believe is important. Well, then that's the better place to continue to focus your energy, as long as you're there with it. And that other project that you have in mind, you've got to wait. I have a system for tackling your to-do list and your tasks, and I call it the 4D system. It's a modification of what already exists. Many people hear delete, delay or delegate or whatever. And I have the 4 of them in a specific order. So the first one is delete. What doesn't belong at all? And sometimes that's something that did belong before. It's okay. You have a change in life. You have a change, like you said, in career. You have a change in your interests. You have a change in your focus because now you're a dad and you're thinking differently. There's so many reasons why you may shift what you're doing. Now you can look at that. What doesn't belong? Now with the rest of it, you have to figure out what you can delegate or automate, or what is the, how can this get done? Not how can I do it? And then the other side of it is, what doesn't belong here and now? We talk about prime real estate all the time. Prime real estate is what you have in this day to capture and to do your energy. And there are some things where you're like, oh, I love that, but it doesn't belong here right now. I'm not getting rid of it. I'm just packing it away. It's like seasonal decorations for your life, right? You don't keep, if you celebrate Christmas or whatever, you don't keep the Christmas decorations in your living room. Right. You keep them up in the attic or in the basement or somewhere where you can get to them when you need them. Well, that's the delay of these things that you love to do. So thinking in those terms, it's, what did it give you in this moment? Where is it driving you and informing all the other things you're doing? And when will you come back to it? Because every day you need to prioritize for so many reasons. The income that you're bringing in, what you need to be working on, what drives you based on your obligations to others. There's so many things that come together to prioritize and to choose. How does that feel when I say those things? Like, how do you connect the choices that you're making now?
I connect all of it. I mean, it's incredible, right? It's true to me. It's true to so many things in life. The part that really resonates with me and what you just said there is being present. So there's a duality to this present thing here in that. As these multi-passionate entrepreneurs that we are, and many and others who don't describe themselves so much, is that we're so present in that moment. We're so focused that we do lose touch with reality, to everything you just said there, of the reality of income, of family, of time, of understanding, okay, if I'm going to build this network of insurance companies and branches, where is my time spent? And do I prioritize that? Am I the type of CEO that prioritizes being on the road and visiting branches and building a team with managers and middle managers and because I also prioritize relationships and building relationships with all of my employees. Right. Fantastic if that's who I am. But with that comes a choice that I have to make of, that means that I'm also not at my daughter's basketball game, or spending time on the couch with my wife, which is also, by the way, very important to spend that time on the couch, which leads me to a question for you in terms of burnout. So many of us are fixated on being that CEO, on being that entrepreneur who is spending all of the time on the road, visiting with the team, building the company culture with the employees, and looks at spending the time at the basketball game with their kids or spending the time with their spouse on a couch doing nothing as, air quotes, waste of time. And my theory behind burnout is because you didn't, air quotes, waste time. In other words, be present in those other times that fill your tank. It leads to burnout. And I know that you also have some really great ideas on burnout and also avoiding it. And so I'd love us to jump into there now.
Yes, please. And that was actually what I was going to bring up next as well, from a slightly different angle. So let's dig into it. Multi-passionates, because of that presence that you're talking about, because of that inclination to deep dive into a particular passion of the moment, passion du jour, if you will, right? Okay. Because of that, and maybe not always having the holistic perspective, which is why when I work with someone as a coach, I can help bring that back around. We can connect it in the ways that it needs to be connected, right? That's why multi-passionates, I think, can be more inclined toward burnout. And this is because, so you're present, you're in the moment in that passion, and that's great because it feeds you. But if you take it too far and then you're neglecting everything else, that becomes, here's the key, and this is the key to me, to all the burnout, the busy work, not productive work. And unfortunately, society really loves that busy thing because then you are perceived as being important, as engaged, that CEO that's traveling and doing all the things. A lot of times that can be busy work, actually, not productive work, especially productive from the whole life perspective. And it's honored a bit too much. How you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. Got so many irons in the fire, so much going on. You'll never hear me saying that. As a matter of fact, if someone's like, ooh, you seem busy this week, I'm like, active, extra active this week. I don't even want to use the word busy because I want to be so careful of that. Productive, productivity is doing the right thing at the right time, the right way for you. And so if we look at that distinction and we don't, again, it goes back to that when I say when the wheels are spinning, but they're not engaged, and when you have the connectivity of your life that you're talking about. Now, to your point about the quote, air quotes, doing nothing on the couch. So that doing nothing is really something, I think what we lose sight of is what the something is. When I talk about creating space in your life and you're like, it's space, clutter is a great example where, oh my gosh, that shelf is empty. That space is empty. We have to fill it with something. We're uncomfortable with that space. But if we think about that space as, oh, but that's where everybody puts their bags when they come in after we've traveled, or that's going to be the space when we have someone visit and they put their stuff, or, we give it a different purpose. And I think the same thing goes for, being very clear on what the purpose is of sitting on the couch with your wife. First of all, if you heard it here first, then listen to this again on loop. Rest is productive, period. Okay. It's like white space in art. You need that, you need that corresponding space. You need rest. You are a human, not a machine. So that's number one. Number two, you need to connect socially and you need to connect with those you love. And if your wife has a love language of quality time and potentially physical touch, then sitting with her on the couch, you have now rested yourself, which is productive. You have attended to her needs and to her love languages, which is extremely productive for your relationship, which is part of the support system you mentioned earlier that we need to build our best lives. So it's not the nothing we think it is.
Yeah, and she certainly does have a love language of just time spent together. It's so funny. We had a date a couple weeks back, and we got a babysitter for it. So for me, when I'm getting dressed up nowadays, it's nice shirt, jeans, whatever. But I'm putting on my freshest Jordans, right? So I got my nice white Jordans on. To her, they're just sneakers, but to me, I put on my white Jordans. So we get in the car and I'm like, so what are we doing? We got the babysitter. What are we doing? Where are we going? She goes, I don't care. I just want to spend time with you. Let's go to UPS. We have a couple things to drop off. I'm like, Devin, do you realize I just put on my Jordans here? Like, do you realize what I'm wearing? And you want me to go into UPS right now? I thought we were going on a date. She goes, yeah, it is a date. We're spending time together. So it's so funny. I love that you spoke about that in terms of a love language, because everybody has a different love language. For me, it's a date where we're going to go to a movie or a dinner or an activity. And for her, it's just like, we can just run errands and it's a date. And I'm so confused.
And by the way, that is efficiency right in there, which I absolutely love. I cannot have a conversation without mentioning the 80-20 principle, right? So 80%, you can get 80% of the way toward your goal with about 20% of the effort or the input, right? So when you look at, for example, a relationship, because we do have time limitations. I get that. We're trying to maximize every moment. And if we have someone as important as our spouse where we want to do right by them, if we understand the love language, then you can be like, oh, okay. So I could stop at Home Depot. We could go to the UPS store. I could, take her out for her favorite tacos. I'm just guessing here. And, and then, boom, I've just achieved master efficiency where I've gotten these, errands done and we've connected.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny that you brought up rest, because I'm doing lives every morning now. So every morning I go on Instagram Live. I do a live before 8:00. And this morning I actually spoke about the power of sleep and the importance of sleep. And how important it is to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every single night. And I was just listening to Brendan Burchard's training on productivity, and he was speaking about that and how the science backs it, in that, the people that are sleeping less than 7 hours, productivity drops, and you're, not operating at your optimum level. So I spoke about that this morning, and it's so important, so important. Something I want to just share as a visualization for everyone with what you just shared there, and I'd love your input on it. So I play basketball, and I when you were talking about busy work, I was thinking about last night. So we had so I played in a basketball league. And we had a game, and we were playing man-to-man defense, which you could just imagine it is what it's called, right? It's man-to-man. It's person-to-person defense. And I'm guarding my person. I get a screen on me now. A screen means that somebody stood in front of me, and I can't get to my person. So I lose my person. And so what happens on my team, on any team, but on my teammate then goes to my person, and I pick up the screener. I pick up the person that screened me. But in that moment that I kind of saw here was we didn't communicate well, me and my teammate, on if he was going to go to my person when I got screened, or if I was going to try to break through the screen and stay with my person. And so what ended up happening because of that miscommunication is I ended up going right, left, right, left, right, left. And while from maybe an outsider's perspective who doesn't know the game, because if you know the game, you can see what happened. But from an outsider's perspective, I look busy. I'm going right, left, right, left. My hands are up. I'm engaged as a defender. My eye contact is on the ball. I'm trying to communicate with my teammates saying, I'm here I'm busy, but I'm doing nothing to prevent the basket, which did end up happening because of this miscommunication, because of me just being busy. The ball went to the corner, boom, 3-pointer. So that's busy. And that's what busyness looks like. It's you're not productive to the end goal of stopping the ball from penetrating or from going to the basket. And one more in the analogy of basketball in terms of spacing. We see this so much with kids sports, and somebody just called it recently and I was like, wow, that's a really good analogy, was like the beehive mentality, where little kids on the soccer field, little kids playing basketball, when they're playing these organized sports, they all group together and surround. You know
where the ball is.
Right, right. They surround the ball. There's no spacing. And because there's no spacing, the ball doesn't enter the goal. Typically, it ends up getting pushed out of bounds, and kids fall on top of each other. So that's how important spacing is in sports. And then we could just equate it to life, right?
That's right. So I think that the description of what you were doing in basketball and the nuance there of how you looked impressive I'm sure that looked very impressive. Arms up and engaged and moving back and forth. But here's the thing. Not only was that not efficient because you guys could have broken through the screen or you could have gotten around the screen or, done what you needed to do if you two were communicating. And it also wasn't effective because the shot got through. Right. So, but again, from most people, and that's such a good metaphor in terms of productivity, is a lot of people will look at all the stuff you have on your calendar. Look at what you're doing. Or you spent, you ever have one of those mornings where you're like, wow, that's 2 hours. What did I do?
Right. What was those 2 hours?
Hi, busy work. But, it's not that you didn't go in with the best of intentions. It's not that you weren't working. You were, but it wasn't engaging. And the phrase that you used, I think, is such a good one, is, to connect to the end goal. Is this moving the needle forward? Is this moving me one step closer to what I'm trying to achieve? Do I know what I'm trying to achieve? Because that's another way to get busy work really cranking in your life, is be like, I don't even know what we're working toward here.
Yeah. What are we doing? Yeah.
Low clarity. Let's dig into that,
Yeah. And, from a coach is there on the sideline. And that's part of their role, is to help you figure out that you're doing the busy work. And you have a very good way of speaking about coaches, managers, leadership in general, in understanding the balance between pushing and nurturing. And I'd love for you to kind of share how that relates in this world that from an entrepreneurial standpoint, from a corporate standpoint, how the importance between balancing the two.
ooh, I love that question. And I was like, ooh, and I had this moment where you're like, you have a really great way of describing that. I'm like, I do? Let's see. Because I think it's intrinsic in me. So first of all, let's be clear about, how we're defining what a coach is versus like a consultant. And I actually work as both to some extent, but mostly a coach. And the coach here is trying to elicit the best in you, but you're discovering it. And so bottom line is, though, from a coaching standpoint, is we come to an agreement right away that this is your game, right? And you are playing it. So I can't do it for you, and I can't want it for you. So from a coaching standpoint, I mean, that's hard too, because once, you are my client, I am cheering you on like crazy and I want you to succeed, but I can't do it for you, can't want it for you. So with that, it's here's what we need. Here's the structure we need. We have to set up a system that will create the accountability that you need. And that actually ties into our self-awareness, our personality types, our inclinations. I do a significant bit of assessment prior to our work together that helps me understand how you will show up best, how you will be inclined to do habits, certain habits, and how we can structure and design systems that will make sense for you, that you will actually show up for. So to me, it's the push of how, what do you need? I probably err on the side of nurturing because I think that everything we need to do, it needs compassion because of trauma and grief and in this holistic view of our worlds. We can't just be like, okay, I'm here, I got to do business stuff and I'm being productive and, and then never mind the fact that, my cat is sick and and I just had a lousy day and, imposter syndrome is like screaming in my head. And, no, you can't never mind. You have to incorporate all of that. So there's a compassionate element to it, but then you keep pushing forward by saying, what's your next best step? You talked about Frozen before with Let It Go. That's the decluttering song. Well, in Frozen 2, the next right thing. That's what you're looking for. And so I don't know if that answered exactly the question you were asking, but that's my take on coaching, pushing, nurturing, and how we create harmony with all of that to keep moving forward, to keep progressing.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is the reason why I believe that you have such a great way of describing it is just by using simple words, to be honest, is I just love the fact that you just say push and nurture. Just simple ways we understand them. I'm actually I am leaning into that more, to use a not so simple analogy there. But I am, when you first start out in public speaking and in speaking in general, you think that using these big words and, they make you sound like you know what you're talking about and so smart and everything. But really what it does is it confuses the audience and they're just sitting there going, wow, he's able to say eloquently, so nice, but I don't know what eloquently means.
But I don't know what that was.
Right. That was really cool, but I have no idea what you said, sir. And so that's why I kind of, when I saw that on the paper here, I saw push and nurture. I was like, I understand what she's saying there. And, the reason why I teed it up with the basketball analogy was, you can have a coach push you, but they can only push you so far without giving you back some nurturing. So that's why the balance is so important, is that you could push somebody so hard, but if you don't give them nurture, they start tuning you out. And then if you nurture somebody so much, that's where you're just keeping them safe in the nest and you're just never letting them just kind of stand on the edge and open their wings. You're just nurturing. Right. So the balance is so important, to be able to give that little push, let them fall out of the nest and onto the ground. Give them that little push, but also go back and pick them up off the ground and help them fly and fly with them. So I really love that, the way that you put it there. there because it's visual. I could feel it. It resonates with me. And it goes into so many things in life as any type of leader that you are, to push your team, to set goals, to help them achieve those, but also to be there on the back end, to nurture them, to find out what is the roadblock, what is preventing you from getting to your next goal. And on that train of thought, again, I just heard this in Brennan Burchard's training. I'm kind of like sucked into his growth day app right now. So I'm all in right now, watching all of his trainings and everything. So many things are sticking with me here in that, if you can have somebody create, and you just said this too, by the way, in your clients, when you create your own goals, when you create your own reality, you're going to go after it more. So when you think about it from a leader's perspective, like I actually asked this of my team, like how many calls do you want to make? How many calls make sense to you? I mean, I'm going to tell you what makes sense to me to make on how many calls worked for me when I was selling insurance, but how many calls can you commit to? How many calls can you commit to that when I ask you, did you make those calls? You're comfortable telling me if you fell short or if you exceeded that goal. And they set some realistic expectations sometimes that I'm not too comfortable with, but they're their expectations and they actually meet them, which is so different than me telling them.
And if they'd gone outside of themselves, and this is where that self-awareness, right, and understanding and pulling all that together is so important. If they'd taken it from you solely, the other thing that can happen is so often it's like, our minds are immediately, our brains are trying to protect us constantly, right? Threats are everywhere. They're right. And so you come up with something and the first thought, because they're nervous, they're excited, they want to do well, but they don't know if they're going to do well. It's like all the feelings, right? All at the same time. And then you throw out a number. It's not their number. It wasn't self-created, right? So it's already coming from outside. And then they're like, and then that's where paralysis comes in. That's where self-sabotage comes in, because there's that immediate uncertainty. But if you're creating it, if you're saying it, you're stating it, you're like, so case in point, I'm coaching someone and I say, all right, so you want to work on this goal. Could you, and I'll throw out an idea. So could you do, this kind of thing, each morning or whatever, take this step or whatever. And I can see in their face, like sometimes when they're like, and I'm like, I can see that sounds about as fun as a root canal to you. So let's take another direction. You know what I mean? And of course, the more that you understand who you are, if you are an introvert, and you have a circadian rhythm. So we get into all of it, right? Love languages, whether you're a night owl or an early bird, like where's your energy being placed during the day? So if you are most energetic at night and you are an introvert, suggesting to you that you attend an early morning in-person networking event is not good advice, right? You start to understand. And it's no wonder when you went and joined that group and you don't keep showing up, that you are not doing that thing. You are not building the habit. And then most of the time when that happens, what do? We blame ourselves, right? What's wrong with me? It's not. It's what's wrong is you chose something that didn't come from you.
Yeah. You had mentioned the word imposter syndrome before, and so much of what we're talking about kind of stems from that is goals that are put on you, this outside force that we're kind of creating too, like, and it's this imposter syndrome of like needing to perform to their goals and expectations rather than our own goals and expectations.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how you deal with imposter syndrome, whether it's for yourself or with your clients.
So my take on imposter syndrome is, it's this idea of when you sit there, you want to do something, whatever it happens to be, showing up as a guest on an interview or stepping out as an expert in your field and sharing information that you believe to be valuable, whatever it happens to be. It's when you sit back and you ask the question, who am I to be doing this? to me, that very clearly indicates, oh, there's imposter syndrome, because so what's happening? Now I want to dig in, like, are you comparing yourself? Well, if I compare myself to Brene Brown, that's never ending well. She's amazeballs. But I'm my own person. I have my own way of saying things. Then you start talking about, well, what is it that you're trying to do? And how might that look? And who would need to hear it? And why might they need to hear it from you? You start to explore all these different ways. Like sometimes the sheer fact, okay, and these are marketing facts, right? That people need to hear things on repeat before it ever engages in their brain, that they need to hear it differently. How many times have you dug into books or podcasts or different things on the same exact topic? And then you hit someone, like you just mentioned, Brendan Burchard, a bunch of times. Well, obviously the way he's saying those things, I'm sorry, he's not saying new things.
Right.
Okay. And I don't mean that in any disrespect, but that's the fact. I'm not saying new things, but I'm packaging them and explaining them in hopefully a way that's going to be like, got it. Okay. So when you start thinking about that, you're like, oh, okay. So then maybe it's not the thing I'm trying to do. It's what I'm bringing to the table. What am I bringing to the table? Doesn't matter what other people are. And one of my absolute favorite ways to counteract imposter syndrome is to talk to people. Look, and in the case of, business where you've been at it long enough to have testimonials, to have thank you notes. It could be a thank you note from a friend of yours. It could be a Facebook message where someone was like, that idea of yours was flipping brilliant. I don't know where you came up with that, but like, I'm on a roll now. I'm good to go. Wherever that feedback is coming from, you tap into that and you're like, oh, that's what I do. You understand your strengths. When you know that's what you're good at. My character strengths, nobody's going to be shocked. One of them is humor. And that I love making people laugh, or at least myself laugh, because I think I'm hysterical. And just being light about the harder stuff, because the nurturer in me wants to be like, okay, there's a lot going on out there. It's going to be okay. But when you tap into, you forget about the comparison, tap into what's really good, take the feedback from people, figure out, like, if you're designing it, what you said before about it comes from you and you're designing it, you don't have time for imposter syndrome, because you can't be imposter. There's no imposter happening, because there's nobody like you in that moment doing that thing, saying that thing.
Yeah, it's so funny. Some of the things that you say I relate to so well. In fact, I just had a voicemail from a podcast guest that I had on several months ago. Actually, she was calling me for the audio file of the show, which I happily give out to our guests. And she left me a voicemail, and in her voicemail, she was just speaking about the experience and how it moved her and all these wonderful things she said in it. And I was like, I gotta save this voicemail. Like, it's mine. Like, It's not even like I don't know how to share a voicemail, nor do I mean, of course, I would want to shout to the rooftops about, getting a voicemail like this to anybody, but it's mine, and I saved it because I'm like, it's so nice to hear. And you're so right. It really does help build that confidence and that confidence boost. So big. And the other thing that you talked about there, which is also impactful for me, and I hope for our audience here, is we're not doing anything new. We're just doing it differently in our own design. And I love that. And I can really relate with that because, as I mentioned to you before we got on the air, I'm working on right now a course, for culture, for company culture, essentially. And I did have some anxieties about, performing this at a conference that there's going to be several thousand people at. And I'm like, the imposter syndrome is real, right? Like, I'm feeling it. I feel it. I'm going to be in front of 1,000, couple hundred people in this one workshop. I know it's going to be a couple hundred because they tell you that. And I'm going to be speaking about culture. What do I know about culture all of a sudden happens, right? But the truth is that I've learned a ton from watching and listening and reading, and also enacting in my own business. So there's that. And the other imposter that comes up for me and that you just touched on is, well, what am I telling them that's new? And you're 100% right in that there's nothing new about it. It's just how Michael interprets it and shares it. Because you're 100% right. There's so many books that I read that I'm like, I could have just read that other book 3 times over, but I'm bored of that other book and I just need it from somebody else in a different way, in a different format. And I'm getting the same message put into my mind in a different way. It's so true.
Even in our conversation right now, and you have such wonderful active listening skills. You're absorbing it. You're reiterating it. You're saying, okay, so what I'm hearing is this, you can tell coach, we're talking coach to coach here. We're having such a hashtag coaches conversation, right? But because of that, even in this conversation, we're each talking about a topic and someone listening is going to get something more out of how you described it in a moment, or maybe more out of how I described it in a moment. It's just different, but it's the same topic. And that's beneficial all around. And that ultimately does go back to finding your niche and finding your people. I can speak to these topics, but I can speak to them with regard to multi-passionates. And you've said so many times in this conversation, yes, that's me. You get it. I get it. Okay. And then you start applying it and it creates a wonderful chain reaction of ahas.
Yeah, these ahas are fun, and you find a lot of ahas in your clients and in so many different ways. I know that you spoke about it in your bio here about like every client's aha is like this success, this great success for you. I'm just interested in what that feels like for you when you see that your client's moment.
Bounce around and then I have to like go tell anybody who will listen, including one of my cats. It doesn't matter. I'm just like, I cheer. I will tell my clients. I do sing to my clients. I will jump and down and do happy dances on video for them. But it's this, it's just, all I can say is it's so satisfying because remember how I said before, I want this for them, but I can't do it for them. And I can't want, they have to want it. And I'm hoping this for them. You know what I mean? That's why I'm showing up. I'm showing up fully and I'm going to do everything I can. And you just have to be like, I did all I can. All right, let's see if it worked. This reminds me of like so many movies you watch where they're like trying to fix something under dire circumstances. It's not always dire. Sometimes it's a matter of you're so close and you're letting this one thing get in the way. Let's do our best to remove it and like open it up and let's see how fast can you take it? Go on the highway. And that moment, I had a recent moment where what we were celebrating was the fact that this client is actually going through a lot of challenges this year that he couldn't have anticipated. And now he's like, I'm handling this so much better than I ever would if we had not worked together last year. And it was like, this is a ripple effect. What you do, the things you say, the chances you take, instead of who am I to say this, who am I not to say this and take a chance that somebody somewhere needs it, has a ripple effect you may never know.
And I think this aha moment that client had, and that resonates with me for sure. I always speak about my coach Merritt as well. And I know that I've gone through a lot of things in the last 2 years and starting a business and having 2 businesses and a podcast and employees and partners in terms of contractors and all this other stuff. I've experienced a tremendous amount, 2 daughters and a wife and family and and I'm like, I don't think I've ever been more sane and less anxious. Like I'm not even taking my antacids anymore. I'm like good. I've never been more present. And a lot of it has to do, it really is. And I think it has to do with something that you focus on with your clients and that was one of your biggest lessons from taking care of your mother, which is take it away, the small stuff, right? Not sweating the small stuff.
It's perspective, right? It's big old life perspective of it's really all small stuff. Or if there is something that isn't small stuff, the more that you understand how much is small stuff and to remove it, to not let it distract you, right? The more you're able to focus in on what is the big stuff, what does really matter to you. That goes back to your values, right? And when you have alignment in your life, this happens, there's a term called cognitive dissonance, right? Where you're like, I'm trying to do the thing and I have a certain, but this is what I value and it's not fitting. You talked about like, okay, you're the CEO and you're building and you're traveling, but you have a wife and kids that you want to spend time with. That's actually why, a number of my clients, but one in particular I'm thinking of in my mind, who came to me and he's like, I've built this successful business. I'm on it. But what legacy am I leaving my kids if I'm not spending any time with them? That's what we call the work-life balance. I call it the work-life harmony because sometimes there is an ebb and flow. Sometimes you do need to give more to one area of your life than others, but it's the connectivity and coming back to it and understanding the ebb and flow and knowing, having the norm be the harmony and then the exception to be the extension. It's being at peace with all of that. I think acceptance and really knowing what matters to you, because when you do and you're in alignment, you're going to show up differently. You are going to do the habits, the things, whatever action steps you need to take. If that's in alignment with who you are, it's going to work for you. Case in point, integrity is a huge one for me. And so there are certain ways that I will not market. There's certain things that I will not do that have been proven in business to work, but they go against my values. So I may be taking the quote harder road sometimes from a business perspective, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I feel the same way, when it goes back to the cold calls or the phone calls about my team.
Yes.
It's a similar conversation that I've had with other business leaders where they're like, you're not making 100 calls a day. And I'm going, I started my own business because I don't want to make 100 calls a day. I don't want to be that guy. And if I don't want to be that person, then why do I want my team members to be that person? I want them to make calls that are thoughtful, that are to people that they've made a connection with or that they can make a connection with, not just randomly going down a list. Exactly. And it is the harder route because, I tell my team, before you call somebody, look them up. Who are they? Mm-hmm. What do you share in common with them? What's the purpose of the call? How can you connect with that person? And if you can't find that, if you can't answer those questions, then don't call them. You're not ready to call them yet. It's not about selling them anything. First of all, everybody needs insurance, right? So it's not about selling them anything. It's about, can I connect with that person? And that's what I'm asking you to commit to when you make those numbers, those calls. So it is a harder route, and you're 100% right with the value. And I want to add to, if you're having a trouble trying to find out everything that you just spoke about, if you're having trouble trying to find out what those values are, what that small stuff is, I had heard it with Tony Robbins, the 80, being the 80-year-old in the rocking chair. And my coach and I do this, and I'm sure you do this with your clients too, of like writing a letter to yourself a year from now or so. And so I was recently just experiencing some trouble and trying to figure out like how do I go forward with this? How do I move forward with this process? And what's important to me right now? And I was having trouble with making a decision on something. And so I decided to take my notebook out and I was like, I'm going to write a letter to myself. So I started writing, Dear Michael, such and such. I start saying something and I said, it's 20 years later. And I was like, whoa, why did I choose 20 years? So I decided to put myself as a 61-year-old. And so whatever, go with it, right? Because that's what came to mind. And it was like, I'm writing to myself as 61-year-old Michael. And it's, I want to thank you. And, the first thing I started with was gratitude of like, I want to thank you for building the life that you've built. And I start, and I'm getting emotional just thinking about this letter. And it was only a few days ago. And I start being grateful for the people in my life, the loved ones. And in all of that, where I'm going with this, none of that is saying, I'm so thankful for the Lamborghini that we're driving today. None of that is speaking about the material things. And it's not that I was being super conscious of it. I so was not conscious in this moment. Like, I'm going to tell you right, I'm painting a picture for everybody. I was sitting in the dark with a candle on and a space heater because it was kind of like cold in my house in a room. And And I was just like, honestly, just trying to warm up when I was like thinking about this. I was like, I'm going to meditate. And then I was like, I can't meditate. I need to write. And that's how this all came about. So I was not conscious. All right. Because if I was conscious, I probably would have like not been in that space. So I'm writing this out. But these were the things that were important, were the people, the family, the loved ones, and the integrity that I went forward with my businesses and what I'm doing. Mm. And that's how it helped me come to the choice, which I'm not going to go into that part. But if you're having trouble trying to find, I say, write a letter to yourself. I don't know whether it's 6 months from now, a year from now, 20 years from now, like it was for me, right? Like write a letter to yourself.
I love that. And it's such a simple technique. So I do say that I have 3 worksheets that I use with all my clients, and I put them out there as a free resource for anyone to grab if they want to along those lines. But the letter writing is kind of fun. So that's something where if you're just like, okay, I don't have time to look at a worksheet or do whatever, do the letter thing. But those 3 worksheets do touch upon what we talked about. One of them is in fact a core values exercise with a list of words. So you can kind of play, you're answering some prompts, very similar, or you could write the letter and then you could go look at the worksheet and be like, oh yeah, those are my words, integrity, education, I'm tossing out my words, but, then there is a focus file, which is actually, it is an exercise to help people, which you could do without the worksheet as well. Set a timer for 5 minutes, take everything that's in your brain, right? Sweep it out, kind of like David Allen's Getting Things Done. Put it someplace safe. That is not your to-do list, though. That is your to-choose list. It's something you process, okay? And then the third worksheet is a joy list worksheet, which is, again, like these are like a few minutes each, some prompts that ask you some questions about what lights you up, what you love, and it is a combination of showing you where your energy will be and what energizes you and what you love to do that can be really effective as self-care. So it's like creating your own self-care guide. It's all the things that we've talked about, and it's very, very simple. But yeah, when you know those things, it changes your perspective and your approach on everything from, your calendar to cold calling.
Yeah, and the decisions that you make. And where can everybody find those worksheets?
Oh, on positivelyproductive.com, right on the homepage.
Awesome. And of course, that'll be in the show notes. Yeah, it really does change your perspective. That's, I kind of lost track when I started telling it because I got emotional, but that's why I was telling it. It was about perspective in that moment of like, you know what? Sometimes we put so much emphasis on the decisions that we're making in the moment. And honestly, 20 years from now, that decision doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, of course, there's going to be some life-changing decisions that you're going to make. Understand that I'm not talking about those decisions. I'm talking about like those like little nonsensical decisions that we're so tripped up on. And that perspective is so important and so helpful. There are a lot of decisions that we make. And one that I really love when I see my guests come on and share is making the decision to give back to their community and serve their community. And you're doing that in so many ways with the Alzheimer's community and the association that you're working with and other women's organizations. I'd love for you, if you'd like to just share how you're working with them, how you're helping them, or what the good work that they're doing with our audience.
That's wonderful. So I started with the Alzheimer's Association. I haven't done that recently, but it was a great kicking off point to be able to say, listen, here's my story. Let's keep sharing it. What I'm doing currently in our community here is there's the financial conference that specifically for women that we have every year in the southern tier of New York State. And what I love about that, there's a Cornell Cooperative Extension is involved in it, and a number of different entrepreneurs that come together as a committee to create this because they've seen so often that there's different conversations about money that women have than men. There's a difference. And if you're a woman entrepreneur, you know what I'm talking about. And so it's wonderful to just say, can we just talk money? Can we talk finances, not be so afraid of it? And I think that's so incredible because we are such a big part of the purchasing decisions that are out there in the world. So I have been a keynote speaker to them, and I waive my fee to do so. I'm also part of the Cornell Cooperative Extension, the health and financial wellness of the community. I volunteer on their committee so they're deciding, what kinds of programs, the programming committee essentially, and what they do in the community to help people, especially when we've gone through things like, this pandemic that has changed, the nature of how we work, removed some people's means for employment, and I just shifted everything. So they work closely with all different other groups in the community, like ProAction and things like that, to help the underserved in the community. And so I'm proud to be there and to help support them. By showing up at a committee meeting and offering whatever insight and innovation I can. And I'm also a member of our local library board. Just a shout out to libraries. They're not going anywhere. They are changing and evolving, and they are such an incredible resource. And the thing that some people forget is it's not, this is a place to go and get books, but it's a place to be connected to the community and the history of the community. So yeah, I'm on the library board as well.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I didn't realize the importance, or what you said, the community of libraries, until the girls, my kids came along and started doing it. And it started reminding me of when I was a little kid and going to the library with my grandmother, and the Mommy and Me classes, and the audiobooks that we would pick up from there, and the reading there. And I remember it vividly. And I lost sight of it in my teen and 20s and 30s. So
as one does.
as one does. But going back to it now, the library in our community here is a beautiful one. They just built it, and it has so much to offer. And every time I'm in there, I run into an old friend or something, and a conversation, and I kind of browse some of the self-development books, because I do love them. So it's wonderful. You mentioned something in there that I just don't want us to just end the podcast without sharing or speaking to, which is on the public speaking side of the business. You're a public speaker. I'm one as well. And I know that we have a lot of listeners who are, the aspiring podcasters, aspiring keynotes, aspiring speakers. And we spoke about that earlier on. One of the things I want to just mention, and you could elaborate on, is as you speak at these non-for-profit events and waiving your fee, and I think that that's one, terrific, and I applaud you for that. But two, it also is a really great way for you to be able to practice your skill, right? It's a great way for you to be able to go out, get exposure, be in front of a new audience, practice the skill, because that's the biggest thing with public speaking. And so I'm interested if you could just shine a little bit light on podcasting, on public speaking for our audience members who might be aspiring to do the same thing that we're doing right here.
Okay, so there are two different lanes,
sure,
so just keep that in mind.
Yes,
but there tends to be overlap in that. Oftentimes we, those of us who do one like to do the other, and that's actually a really good thing to consider. This is especially from a personality standpoint, a productivity standpoint, is that you are going to be fed a different kind of energy stepping out and being like a keynote speaker than you are a podcaster, right? So you may find that you love one more than the other. You're right about going out and finding places to volunteer. So this is a great example of, you don't always have to throw money at something, so to speak. You can, offer in-kind services, and that are very valuable and that, matter. It does allow you to practice. And you're right. I've also done continuing education credits. Actually, I realized the full circle that happened is that, in the last couple of years, I've done a presentation for chapters of NAPO, the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. That's a mouthful. I've done continuing education credit presentations for some chapters. And so that's a wonderful full circle from having started with them and creating this business. But you're right, those signature talks you can do as you're volunteering. So those are things where you get involved in local committees, you connect with people, you find the people who are in charge of, offering these presentations. Local libraries are a great resource for that because a lot of times they will develop those. So that's my tip there. In terms of podcasting, it is a commitment. So is blogging for that matter. And I started a blog once upon a time because people said, hey, you're a business owner, start a blog. And this is me blowing the dust off my blog because I was not doing it because I don't get jazzed up about sitting and writing on a blank page like I do by having a conversation like you and I are having today. Here. So, right. So that's, you find the way that feels good for you. And podcasting can be that way. Then there's all different kinds. My recommendations to you, I mean, yes, I know a lot of people like to talk about equipment. I put some on my favorites page of my website just because like there are certain things that I love that are very reasonably priced. You can do this all on a budget, but before you worry about any of that, know your reason why. Why you want to do this. Is it a hobby? Is it for fun? Is it to generate leads for your business and establish yourself as an expert, get some street cred, that sort of thing. Know why you want to do it. And this is actually a great life lesson. It's a big part of what I coach because when we know the why of, let's say, a space in our home that we're decluttering, what do you want to use it for? What's the purpose, right? Your why. When you know your why in terms of what you want to do in your life, and you look at your calendar and am I doing things that connect to that? Knowing that why creates the filter for what belongs and what doesn't.
Yeah. I love that you just said that. And, it goes to your favorite book, Starting with Why, Simon Sinek.
Yes.
The why, I focus on that when I'm teaching public speaking. When people ask me about podcasting, it's why are you doing it? Why do you want to do it? Because all of it is a commitment. You don't just get on a stage and start speaking. I mean, it happens, but it's a commitment to practicing that craft. It's a craft. It's the same thing with podcasting, of blogging, whatever it is. You got to know why, because you got to be consistent with it. People want to know that they're, every 2 weeks, the Michael Esposito show is dropping on a Wednesday, and that's happening.
Yes. And to be consistent doesn't mean a certain thing. It means consistent for you.
Right.
It can be a featured, this was great. My podcast producer, Alicia Galati of Galati Media, she was, trying to explain, actually is in a recent episode on my podcast about how you don't always have to go full throttle on a podcast. You could do a series of podcast, episodes. It's about being intentional. Like you said, why do you want to do this? What are you trying to achieve? And what can your listeners expect? It could be once a month. It could be once a week. It could be every 2 weeks. You choose the pattern, the design. Is it going to be solo episodes or with guests? What's it going to look like? And why do you want it to look that way? And then you move forward with what feels right for you. And here's the key. And this is what I love to coach the most, is sustainable.
Yeah, that sustainable is huge, that you can keep doing it. And I love the choice in there because it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that, and you end, as a creative, right, is that you end it when you decide to end it. Cause like to your point, I love doing this podcast. I love doing this show, but I don't know if I'm going to do this for the next 20, 30 years. I don't know that that's going to be the situation right now. I love it. Like I come in here, this is a passion, right? But, at some point, I'm going to choose that it's no longer. And that's okay. And we're okay with those decisions. You have a wonderful mantra that you share with your community, with your clients, and that you'll be sharing with our community now. And that is, do less, live more, breathe easier. And take a breath with you. I'm interested in what that mantra means to you. And it sounds like you came up with it on your own. So I'd love for you to share with our audience what that mantra means.
All right. So I will give another shout out to a great expert that inspired me to do this. And Michelle Mazer of 3-Word Rebellion, actually, her book inspired me to do this. And I was such a rebel that I decided not to do 3 words, but 6 words, but it's 3 phrases. So, but really what it was about was saying, What do you stand for? What are you tired of seeing in the industry? You know, what's bothering you? So often we just get caught up in what's already there. Productivity, oh my gosh, productivity coaches are everywhere. And the industry was very pervasive in terms of pushing a narrative forward of, hey, let's hustle and grind and get the stuff done. Let's do more in less time. And I was like, no, can we not? But I still want to do things. I still want to get stuff done. I still want to move toward my goals. How do we reconcile this? And I'm like, we got to do less, man. But there's probably, but where's the more? The more is living more. It's doing the right things at the right time, the right way for you. It's doing less of the stuff that doesn't work for us, the busy work and the things that are unsatisfying, having full permission to quit and to let go. And so the do less, live more came first. And I was like, I need a third. What is it? And I was like, and it actually, that came from a couple of things that were said to me early on in my coaching career. One was that when we get together, one of the first things I do is calm the storm. You got all the ideas and all the excitement and all the stress and all the, what are we going to do? And I don't know. And I'm trying decision fatigue and all the stuff. And I was like, it's going to be okay. And then when I thought about what is it that I can guarantee that I can do for you, I don't want to make false claims, but I can tell you that when we get together, you will breathe easier. And that's where it came from.
That I love breathe easier because it's so important in everything we do in our life is to breathe. We forget that. Like we forget just breathing in conversation. To relate it back to public speaking. So, right. So often, I mean, honestly, almost every week, so I'm a Toastmaster and we meet weekly. And, whenever I give feedback, whenever I'm asked a question about, speaking without filler words and without ums and ahs, which are normal, by the way, because I say them all the time too. It's about breathing. I tell them it's about take that breath, take that pause. And in that pause, take a breath, breathe. And when you do, you feel better. You fill your lungs. And it just also with the hard choices we make in life and breathing and it really is. It's so true. I was looking at it and I was like, I feel like you can make it 3 words, by the way. I feel like it can be do, live, and breathe. And then you assign your own meaning to it. But I do love the rebellion in you of I am not going to make this just 3 words or whatever. It just didn't work for you. And you were like, I'm fine with that, man. I'm good with it. I love it. This has just been a wonderful experience with you. I kind of had a feeling it would be. I knew we got to give a shout out to Jim Prey. Vice President over at Den 10 Insurance Services. Reach out to him. But yeah, Jim put us in touch several months ago. And I know I was sitting outside when he called me and told me about you. He couldn't stop talking about how wonderful of a person you are, how positive you are, how polished you are. And that you have your own business and an entrepreneur. And he goes, Michael, you gotta talk to her. You gotta get her on your show. He's like, you gotta get her on your show. And she's a Den 10 client. I said, I will, I'll reach out to her. What a great referral to the show you've been. This has just been a terrific episode. I feel it just flowed so beautifully. I want to thank you so much for coming on today. And I got to thank Jim for introducing us.
Yes. Thank you, Jim. This is where the magic happens, in my opinion, when you have a conversation. But when you have one with someone who is fully present as you are and as giving as you are, it can't help but be amazing. And it's been my pleasure.
It's been awesome. So, of course, all of your information will be in our show notes. But if you can, for our audio listeners here who may not be able to look at those quite yet, what's the best ways that people can get in touch with you, whether social media, email?
So website will take you everywhere you need to go, positivelyproductive.com. You are listening to an incredible podcast right now. So if you want to pop over to Positively Living, I would be honored. And if you want to just have some fun and see just how goofy I can get, then join me on Instagram, positively_Lisa.
I love it. Yes. And you are very goofy. I love it. If you didn't get it from her bio of being buried under her cat, I think that speaks volumes right there about how silly you are. And that is your speaker bio. So I love that. You're sharing that with everybody when you go out speaking. You have the professional and the fun, and it's so important to have all of it. I also want to give a shout out to your website, where you list all of the books that you've read or have been inspired by and authors. I think that that's tremendous. I'm not going to lie. I am going to steal that idea from you.
Do it. It's so helpful.
I know. Yeah. I told you that when you showed it to me. I was like, oh my goodness, I need to get, because we just have so many great authors out there, so many great thought leaders, so many different ways that we can consume positive energy, leadership, business acumen, just so much. And to have a list like what you have on your website is just tremendous to anybody out there that's trying to accomplish anything. So big shout out to your books page. I think people should definitely visit it, take a look at the books that are on there. I have in my reading list the ocean, the blue ocean.
The blue ocean strategy.
The blue ocean strategy that's next on my reading list because of you. So I want to thank you for that. It's been a joy to interview you today. Thank you so much for coming on. And we'll probably have you on again soon.
I'd love it.
Thank you for listening to the Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.